Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my favorite horror movie. Each week, I have a very special guest join me to talk about their favorite horror movie. And today, he's a writer, director, so many things that you do. I was looking over it all and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you have time to sleep. But Michael Varrati is here today. He also is one half of the podcast Midnight Mass, which is how we met. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am thrilled that it is now the Halloween season and getting to celebrate all these spooky things that we love. And I'm just honored that you asked me to join you.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. We actually met at the Academy Museum when you and Peaches hosted the screening for Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. That was such a fun event.
Thank you. We're still pinching ourselves that we got to do that. We really love Elvira, obviously, and we love Cassandra. And getting the opportunity to celebrate her, we will always take the chance to, sing her praises. But getting to do so on the stage at the Academy Museum was a cult film fan's dream, and we love that so many people showed up and she got to see her movie screened at that venue. It was a wonderful night, and I'm so glad that they gave us the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, that is so cool. And that was my first time seeing it in a theater. Because ever since, I've seen it, it's always been at home on Blu-ray or on streaming or something. So to get to see it projected and on film, that was so special. And you guys did such a great job hosting the event. Just perfect night.
Oh, thank you. Well, and here's a little bit of trivia. I'm not sure if the host at the Academy said this beforehand because we were backstage, but the print that you saw is Cassandra's personal print of the movie as well. So
That is so cool. I would be terrified if I was a projectionist. Projectionist. I would be terrified to touch that. I'd be like, oh no.
it's so interesting though, like so many of these older films, these cult films that we love, the studios don't always store 35 prints of them, or if they do, they don't rent them out. So when you go to these repertory houses like the New Bev or places in New York that do these one-off screenings, a lot of the times the prints do come from the filmmaker if it's a smaller run film. I remember Lewis Jackson, the filmmaker who made the movie Christmas Evil, which always, plays around December, whenever that screens, they usually have to get in touch with him because he has the 35 millimeter prints in his house waiting and hoping, I guess, for somebody to call. And they invariably do. That movie is very popular in December. So
Yeah, I've been to the New Beverly a few times, and then what was the other one that I went to? I don't remember the other one off the top of my head, but they're like, "Oh yeah, this is Tarantino's like personal print." And it's like, man, I would not want to be the person in charge of that because with my luck, I would, I don't know, damage it somehow, and that would be worst nightmare. Speaking of nightmares, what is your favorite horror movie? I don't know if that was a very smooth transition, but we'll
I
pretend it
liked it.
was.
No, the thing is, growing up being a horror movie fan, it is sort of like a changing goalpost, right? Every day there's something new that I'm obsessed over, but I always go back to the tent poles. What are the things that I love the most? And there's one movie that I always return to, and it's 1986's Night of the Creeps. And in fact, I had written about it when I was asked to for a book called My Favorite Horror Movie. And I wrote about that movie. So when you asked me to do your show, I'm like, well, I know exactly the movie I'm going to pick because I've already said.
Oh, that is so cool. That's an awesome cover, by the way. I had not seen this movie. I had heard of it, but I had not seen it. So I watched it last night while I was eating dinner, and I loved it. I thought it was so much fun and just all the practical effects. And I don't know, it was just such an exciting movie to see. And also the whole time, and I totally forgot to look this up, everything looked so familiar. Do you happen to know the filming locations?
Yes, well, there is a the sorority house is in Los Angeles. I think it's over by UCLA or USC. I have gone to visit it. I've got like it is still there. It is still in operation. And I was informed by a friend of mine, filmmaker Eric Lawrence, that the house across the street is the fraternity house from Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College. So if you're a horror movie tourist and you go to see the house from Night of the Creeps, which I think the address is easily looked up, you can then turn around and see another one. And then the diner in the movie is actually in North Hollywood off of Lankershim.
Oh.
It's right next to the NoHo 7. But what's funny about it is in the movie, of course, it's a standalone diner and it's like, against the night sky and it's the middle of nowhere. But if you're in the city, it's literally against a building. So they did some matte work to paint it out, but it is still there.
Oh, very
So
cool. Yeah, the whole time I was watching, I was like, this looks familiar and that looks familiar. And then I was totally going to look it up after and forgot. So I'm glad you knew. And that's so cool. You got to visit some of the places. I love visiting locations for horror films like the Halloween house and the Myers house and the Malignant
yeah.
house. There's just like so many in the LA area. And we're so lucky that we get to visit them and see them in person.
No, it was one of those things during the pandemic when we were all stuck at home and couldn't really see each other to kind of break up the monotony of just sitting at my place. That was really when I started going to look at places because I'm like, well, I've lived in LA for years and years and years, but I didn't always have the opportunity to just go see the house from Poltergeist or see the house from Teen Witch. And it was like, well, it hurts no one because I basically am in my car or I jump out and take a selfie if I was so moved, but it was by myself. So I used the lockdown every couple weeks. I would go and check out a new house. Now I've seen a lot of them, whereas before I hadn't. So it's one of those things where if you just have a little time and live in Southern California, there's so many places you can go check out.
Oh, yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, I think I did the same thing when we were stuck at home. We went for a lot of drives. Like we drove to Malibu and back a lot just because it's a long drive. Listen to a couple podcasts, and then it's just a gorgeous view. And we had the top down. Perfect, perfect thing to do when you're stuck at home.
Absolutely.
So do you remember the very first time that you ever watched this film?
Yeah, so the first time I ever saw this movie, I believe, was on USA Up All Night, which was how I saw so many movies when I was younger. That was kind of my conduit to the world of horror when I was a young kid. And this movie was on USA Up All Night, although I'm usually pretty good at remembering who hosted the films I saw. I can't remember if this was a Rhonda or a Gilbert hosted film, but I remember being really taken with the movie because it has that really great like black and white opening with the maniac with the hatchet going up to the car, and so it looks like a classic like 1950s horror movie. And then when it kicks into the 80s and gets like very John Hughes but with alien slugs and zombies, it goes hard. And I loved that it did all of these things at once and somehow worked. And it was one of those films that especially it's hard to communicate to people today who get all their movies on streaming because if a movie ends you can just hit watch again and start it from the beginning. But back when I watched it on cable I was like, what was that? How do I see it again? And I lived in a small town and their video store selection was okay, but they didn't have a lot of horror movies, so it took a while for me to get to see Night of the Creeps again, but I was always on the lookout for it because I was transfixed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you mentioned the alien slugs.
Yeah.
How are you with bugs in real life? Like, if you ran into one of those in your place, would you be okay? Would you be creeped out?
I wouldn't love it, but I will tell you that as far as bugs go in my relationship, for example, I think that there's always like uh, the bug killer and the bug saver, and I'm more of a bug saver. Like if my partner sees a spider, he's like, "Oh my God," and I'm like, "Hang on," and I'll go get a cup and I'll like put the little thing and take it outside. I don't like to kill them, and a lot of times I don't really get bothered by them. There are bugs that freak me out. It's definitely aesthetics. I understand. I
Mhm.
don't like centipedes, and I think maybe that's it. It's like, the more crawly they are. So the slug would probably weird me out. You don't want that in your house.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I'm okay with bugs as long as they don't get too close to me.
Yeah.
Like just looking at them from a distance is okay. Or like if they're in a pet store. The other day I went to the pet store and they had tarantulas, but they were in, the glass casing. So I was fine with that. But my boyfriend David does not like spiders. And yesterday morning, actually, we were walking at the Huntington and there was the biggest spider I had ever seen. It had it was thick, I'll say that. But I was just like, oh my God. So when I was watching the movie last night, I was like, that's interesting because normally, when you hear about people's favorite horror movies, you hear them talk about like they're terrified of Pennywise because it's a clown, or you hear about, they're terrified of Jaws because it's a shark. So with this one, I was like, oh yeah, I wonder how people who are afraid of bugs react when they see those slugs.
Yeah, it's funny because I never really was bothered by the slugs. I think they're fascinating. I
Mhm.
have I have a replica of one somewhere around here. Someone got me one of the slugs for Christmas, and because I guess my love of this movie is well known.
Oh, that is so funny. I was actually going to ask that if you had any props or any memorabilia from the film, but that's very cool. Just hopefully one day, there's not a real one and you think it's the prop one, and then all hell breaks
Yes.
loose.
No, you know what's funny is I don't have a lot of memorabilia. I certainly have a lot of horror movie related things around my place because it just kind of comes with the gig. But like I know some people who collect toys or do like a lot of posters and things. And so I early on kind of decided I didn't want too much because I love everything. It's not because I don't love it, it's like I love it too much. And the second I started that, it would just enter like hoarding space. So I don't have a lot of Night of the Creep stuff, but I do have two items. I have a replica of the slug. And I do have the German poster of the movie because it's
Oh,
slightly
cool.
different than the one sheet. Because the one sheet from America is like the animated dead guy in the suit like standing outside of the door, which is cool. But the German poster is just more kind of stylized. It's like that zombie hand reaching through the door to turn the doorknob, and I always loved the way that looked.
Yeah, that's the one I'm using for the thumbnail. I saw that one
Oh,
last night
great.
and I was like, oh, this is a really cool poster. I love it. How many
Yeah,
times
it's.
do you think, oh, sorry.
Oh,
How many
go ahead.
times by now do you think you have seen the film?
I have seen it probably dozens of times. I always make a point to see it when it plays theatrically. I'll go and check it out. And I've seen it theatrically on multiple coasts. When I was on the East Coast, I remember in Pittsburgh at the Andy Warhol Museum, they did a double feature of Night of the Creeps and Night of the Comet, which is a great double feature. I have seen it here in Los Angeles several times. And there are two different endings to the movie. So sometimes you'll get a different ending with the film. And I would like it if they would advertise it, but they rarely do. So I think what happens is you kind of, as a Night of the Creeps fan who has seen the movie enough times, you get to be surprised, like which one are we getting this time around? So
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't know there were two endings. Do you remember the ending you saw the first time you ever watched it?
I believe the first ending I ever saw was the theatrical cut, and the theatrical cut's the one that they probably would have pushed at the end of the 80s, early 90s, because that's what was released in theaters. And it's one where she's petting the dog and the slug leaps out of the dog into her mouth, and that's kind of like a gag of an ending. And then there's the director's cut in the original ending of the film where the body of Cameron, the Tom Atkins character, comes out of the fire and the police like shoot it and it explodes into slugs and the slugs go into a cemetery and then like the alien spaceship shows up looking for them and then it kind of cuts to the credits. And I've seen that ending theatrically a couple times as well, and I always love that too because I know that's Fred Decker's preferred ending to the movie.
Oh, that is so cool. I feel like I would have had my mind blown. Like if I went to go see a movie that I had seen so many times and then it had a different ending, I would feel like, what the hell? But how did you find out about the second ending? Did you already know going into it?
No, I think it's actually what you said is that I had gone to see it when it played theatrically and they played the director's cut of the film and it ended different. And I sort of had that moment where I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't remember this being how this ended. And it was sort of a revelation. So I wasn't mad about it. I was sort
Mhm.
of stoked because I, at that point, had either only seen it on TV or VHS. And so, like, there was a little bit of a shaky memory. But I'm like, I don't think that I remember this. And it was great. And I love that that's how I got to experience it for the first time.
Oh, that is so cool. Out of all the times you've seen it, do you have a favorite memory associated with watching it, whether it's, getting to bring someone and seeing their reaction to it, or the first time you saw it? Is there something that sticks out to you?
Well, obviously, I love that I got to see it on USA Up All Night because it was so core to my growing up and appreciation of the world of horror. But I love showing this movie to people. So every couple Halloween seasons, there will usually be like some movie night with friends. And if there's someone who hasn't seen it, I'm like, all right, well, buckle in. We're going to watch Night of the Creeps. And I am happy to say that without fail, it goes over well. Like I've never shown it to a group of people where people are like, it was just fine. It's a crowd pleaser, and that's what I think is great. It's a truly fun movie.
For me, the two movies that I like show everybody are Chicago. I'm like obsessed with that film, and Elvira Mistress of the Dark. I watch it every year on my birthday. And I feel like my favorite part of getting to do that is looking over and seeing everyone's reaction. And for both of those films as well, people love it. Chicago, I'm surprised a lot of people that I know haven't seen it. I guess because it's 25. 20?
Oh gosh, I
I
saw Chicago
know.
in the theater twice.
Oh my God. So did I. I think that might have been the first movie I saw multiple times in a theater.
Oh,
Yeah, that
it's
was
great. It's a
crazy.
great movie. That's a good one to show people. I need to revisit that. I haven't seen it in a while.
I love it. And then with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, I have seen that movie so many times, but getting to show family, getting to show friends, and then seeing their reaction, and then once it's over, they understand like why I love that movie so much. So it's just,
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the best things about movies is getting to show people something that you love and then getting to talk with them after and see how it resonated with them.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's one of those Elvira especially, there's just such a great rewatch value to it.
Mhm. Do you feel like Night of the Creeps has influenced your filmmaking?
Um, I would assume it has. I mean, the truth is that I lived in Pittsburgh for a great many years, and I always looked to George Romero, who was very crucial to the Pittsburgh landscape, but also to horror in general, because of his work in Night of the Living Dead and Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and the ability to use horror as a mechanism to comment on things in society, and unquestionably. Night of the Living Dead influences Night of the Creeps. Like it's there. It's in the text. And I think that there's just like kind of a chain of influence where all of these things spoke to me. I love the idea of using a zombie to be more than a zombie.
Mm,
But I also love Night of the Creep's ability to have a very serious situation while always also having levity. Like, I think of this movie as funny, but it's not a horror comedy. It's
mhm,
not like Shaun of the Dead, which I quite like, and Shaun of the Dead has a great emotional core to it, but it is billed as a comedy. There's setup and joke, setup and joke. This movie, there are some funny moments, but it's still very firmly horror. And I think that it's really smart that they never lost sight of that. Because I've worked with production companies that don't want you to inject any humor into your horror
mm,
movie or any humor into your genre movie. And I think that that's a mistake because I think that people deal with trauma and serious situations often by finding ways to laugh because you need to.
yeah.
And Night of the Creeps, I think, handles it really well. And I think that that has really, really spoken to how I construct scripts because I've never written a horror movie where there wasn't some element of comedic DNA to it,
Mm.
even if it's very serious subject matter.
No, I like that a lot. I like what you were saying. That I agree with that totally because when I'm in a stressful situation, my first instinct is to make a joke or to make light of the situation because then you're not stuck in, how heavy the situation is or getting down with the mood. And I just feel like, yeah, just making light of it helps deal with it easier.
Yeah.
This movie has a lot of really unique and interesting characters. Is there one that stands out to you as your favorite?
I actually really like JC, who is the best friend, because, and I wrote about this when I wrote the essay for the book. When I was younger, obviously, queer visibility was non-existent, or, I didn't know where to look for it based on where I was living at the time and when I grew up. And in this movie, JC's attachment to Chris, the character played by Jason Lively, the lead character, he really cares about his friend. And like, when you look at teen comedies from the 80s, the relationship between boys was often very um kind of broy, sometimes chauvinistic, but very boy, if that makes sense, like sporty kind of dude. And
Mhm,
this movie does something different. It shows that the relationship between two men, they can be fond of each other, they can care about each other, there can be love there. And there is this whole thing where, Chris so badly wants to join the frat, and that frat's never going to let those two in. And JC knows that, but he goes along with it because he cares about his friend and it's what his friend wants. And so there is this sort of element where you see JC kind of loves Chris. Not kind of, he tells him later, I love you. Like, and in 1986, to have a male character say to another male character, whether it was expressly coded as queer or not,
mm.
that they love them didn't happen. And so I've always felt for that character. I'm very protective of that character in my mind, even though his fate in the movie is not ultimately very
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
The truth is like we didn't get characters like him. We got characters like the character that Tom Atkins plays, as the kind of grizzled detective with the cool one-liners. And of course, I love him. You're supposed to love him. And Tom Atkins smartly plays that character as a heightened version of toxic masculinity. I think that Tom Atkins and Bruce Campbell have a very firm understanding of how to take what's expected of machismo and clown it,
Mhm.
while also for people who don't know they're making fun of it, they're like, yeah, that's a dude's dude. And so like everybody's kind of like in on it, but like if you really are aware, like Atkins is making fun of this, Bruce Campbell is making fun of this. And I love that character, but you're supposed to love that character. And you're supposed to love Chris because he's the lead and he's the quintessential 80s boy. But JC is sensitive and JC is sweet. And when he leaves that recording for Chris
Mhm.
and like basically is like, I love you and like I want you to be careful. It's just like we never got that before. And I realized later how important that was to me to see in a film.
Mhm.
And Fred Decker has talked about it, and queer fans have said like, "Oh, this is really gay," and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and I don't even know if it's important if it's overt or not.
Mhm.
I think what's important is um the love between them. Like I know how I choose to think of it, but if someone else looks at it another way and just understands that you're allowed to care and you're allowed to be sensitive, that's also good, you know.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, totally, totally agree. I also love the character of JC. I think he stood out to me as my favorite as well. I was just like, oh, this is really interesting to see. And I even double checked the year the movie came out too when I was watching. I was like, this is really nice because, yeah, it's not something that you really see in older, especially I guess yeah, genre horror films as well. Like it didn't really have that back then, so it stood out to me as one. I just yeah, really really loved it. Thought it was really sweet. If tonight was a night of creeps and
Yes.
the movie became real, you got sucked into the movie. How well do you think you would do, and what would you do to survive?
Well, I wouldn't go to a frat party, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that to survive Night of the Creeps, we just got to leave town. I mean, but isn't that true of everything?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that like I would probably be free and clear because where are the places that all these monsters are going? They're not places that I'm going, so I'm all
Yeah.
right. But I would hope though that there was a Tom Atkins out there that would save us all because all those slugs are coming for all of us eventually.
Is there anything about this film that you would change if you had input back then and they came to you, before they finished the final draft and they were like, hey, do you have any changes that you want to make? Is there anything that sticks out to you and you're like, oh, I would maybe tweak this or edit this?
Hmm. Oh, I mean, you know what? I not really. I do love this movie for what it is, and it's real easy to use the lens of 2024 to look at something in 1986 and change it. But things were different. The cultural attitudes were different. So anything that I would nitpick would be through the lens of today, not the lens of then.
Mhm.
If I could have more of anything, maybe more of the sorority girls because they make me laugh. Like there's that one girl who's like coming down the stairs, and I'm going to paraphrase the line because I unfortunately don't remember it specifically, but she has like one moment where she
Mhm.
comes down the stairs and she's like totally for sure or something. Like she just has like some Valley Girl delivery, and uh I love that. And I'm just like, what's her story? Who is
Mhm.
she? Like, what is she doing in the world, today if she made it through that night?
Yeah, no, I think that would be really fun. What about a remake? If the whoever owns the rights to this movie came to you and they were like, "Hey, Michael, do you want to do a remake?" Is that something you would be interested in?
Oh gosh. I mean, would I want to do a remake? I don't know. Maybe a legacy sequel, like something that like brings the slugs back. So then you could have the opportunity to bring some of the characters that we like back, but in a different context. Because I think that Fred Decker did this so well. He clearly loves horror, but also is a devotee of horror movies of a certain era. That opening is pure William Castle, 1950s drive-in, and then he brought that into the 80s with the whole 80s of it all. And I just don't know that you could follow that tone unless you did something wildly different. It's sort of like, you you can't you can't perfect something that's already perfect. So you either need to take the story somewhere else or do something totally different with it. And I think that would be what I would want to do. Maybe that's not what fans would want, but I just wouldn't deign to touch what he already did.
I think that the ending, either ending actually, because I saw the director's cut last night when I watched it, so uh, lends itself to a sequel, and it would be fun to see, all these years later, what happens if they come back, and I think that's a really good idea. Bring back any people who are still around, to reprise their roles. Maybe bring back the children of the slugs, some Nepo slugs.
Yeah.
I just feel like that would be really fun, and I like that idea because yeah, a remake. I don't know. Some older horror movies I would like remakes just because of the technology we have now. Just I think there are some things that we could pull off as far as visual effects and stuff that we couldn't do back then. Although I am like the biggest proponent for practical effects. Like my favorite thing about horror is when it is practical. But for this one specifically, I think a legacy sequel would be great. And I just think it'd be so fun. I don't know. You could change the setting to like literally anything.
Yeah,
And
it's
I just
true.
think it'd be so fun.
Because, this movie, for as big as of an idea as it is, it basically transpires in a house for
Mm.
most of it. So you could just take it somewhere else.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is a birthday party. I don't know why. Just a birthday party and then all hell breaks loose. I think that'd be a fun one. Or
Slugs in the cake.
yeah, something like that, or a holiday one. I'm big on holiday. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christmas, but like, I don't know, an Easter one or a Valentine's Day one. I think that'd be very fun.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, I love Critters too because it takes place at Easter.
Oh yeah, we need more Easter horror movies. That's what I'm thinking.
We do.
So if someone's watching this video and they go and watch Night of the Creeps after this and they love it and they're looking for more movies that are similar to it, what other movies would you recommend to them?
Well, I think that double feature at the Warhol Museum that I had mentioned really hit the nail on the head by pairing it with Night of the Comet. Even though Night of the Comet is more of a straightforward zombie movie, it's Valley Girls versus the zombies. So it's got that 80s kind of zhuzh, and I really love that movie. I think it's very special in its own way. I also always felt that James Gunn's Slither was sort of a
Oh
spiritual
yeah.
successor to Night of the Creeps. I think that they together really kind of have the market cornered on alien slugs. So both of those would be good ones to start with for sure.
All right, and then what about Halloween candy? When you're watching these horror movies, what is your go-to Halloween candy?
So I know it's divisive, but I love candy corn because the truth is, candy corn is seasonal. It's actually Halloween candy. I'm here to tell you, you can enjoy a Snickers, but you can buy a Snickers all year round.
Mhm.
If you're gonna eat candy for Halloween and you want Halloween candy, make it Halloween candy. I really like candy corn. I also do enjoy I don't know. I don't do a lot of chocolates. I'm a bummer actually. Like friends don't love to do sweets with me because I don't do a lot of sweets. I'm more of a savory person. I like chips and salsa or like, French fries. So my candy love is sort of limited. That being said, I think that like anything pumpkin for the season, like a pumpkin chocolate,
Ooh,
something fun.
nice. Nice, nice. And then my favorite question to ask people when they come on the show is for Halloween costumes, do you have a favorite costume that you've ever dressed up as?
I go all out on my Halloween costumes. I'm a little bit intense about it. So I have a lot of costumes I really like. A couple years ago, I did the Killer from Slaughter High, and I know a lot of horror fans really liked that, and I wanted to do it because he's a slasher that you don't really see people dress as for Halloween a lot. I've been the Fly before. I'm really proud of that costume. Um, I was Billy from Halloween 5 last year, and Jeffrey Landman, who played Billy, saw the costume and was really thrilled with
Oh,
it.
that's
So.
awesome.
Yeah, I always like my costumes because I have fun making them. They're always more for me than for anybody else because I do tend to choose weird or niche costumes. And so like I know well in advance that when I go to a party that like a lot of times people are gonna be like, what are you supposed to be? But like for the two or three people that I encounter that like, oh my God, are you Billy from Halloween 5 or are you the guy from Horns? That's worth it. I
Yeah.
found my people.
Oh, that is awesome. And I know you are super busy right now. Like I mentioned, when I was going through trying to come up with an introduction for you, I felt like I couldn't, no matter what I said, it wouldn't do justice. You have Midnight Mass podcast, right? You have the Fangoria Awards, the Chainsaw Awards are coming up. There's a zombie outside. For people who are interested in keeping up with all your projects and everything you have going on, where would be a good place for people to come and follow you?
The best way to know about all the various goings on I have are just by following me on X or Instagram at Michael Varrati. It's just my name. As far as Midnight Mass comes out every other Wednesday at midnight. We do have a X or Twitter page, whatever you choose to refer to it as, at Midnight Mass Pod. And yeah, that's it. We're always up to some stuff.
Oh. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of my favorite horror movie. It was so much fun getting to talk with you and getting to hear about this movie because I'm so glad I watched it. It was just a blast and I really
I'm
appreciate it and so much fun.
I'm glad you watched it too. I'm glad to introduce Night of the Creeps to somebody else and, thrill me.
Well, thank you, Michael, and I hope you have a very happy Halloween.
You too. Happy Halloween.
Bye.